Hi, this is Brock Dickinson, and I'm coming to you today from the city of St. Catharines in Canada. And I wanted to talk about a new idea that's emerging in the field of entrepreneurship. So there's an organization called the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. It's actually a collection of researchers at universities around the world. They work from 115 different countries, and they've been studying entrepreneurship for over 20 years, which means they're engaged in what are called longitudinal studies, or basically studies that take place over a long period of time. And they've suggested that there's something that people miss about entrepreneurship, that it's not a single kind of thing, but in fact there are two different kinds of entrepreneurship. One they refer to as opportunity entrepreneurship, and the other is necessity entrepreneurship. Now, opportunity entrepreneurship is the one that we're kind of familiar with when we think of somebody like a Mark Zuckerberg launching Facebook. This is because an entrepreneur sees a specific opportunity, a hole in the market, a new product, a new idea that they can exploit and develop over time. That's sort of one end of a continuum or a spectrum. At the other end is an entrepreneur who's focused not on opportunity, but necessity. They've become an entrepreneur not because they're pursuing a specific opportunity, but because they're forced into it from a lack of alternatives. The classic example of a necessity entrepreneur is a subsistence farmer. Imagine a poor person in a small village in sub-Saharan Africa who has no job opportunities in their local area, and in order to support their family, in order to feed their kids, they take up subsistence farming. That doesn't require less entrepreneurial skill than starting a company like Facebook. It's just a different set of skills. But in both instances, the individual takes a risk to create a venture that tries to meet a certain set of needs. Now, in that opportunity entrepreneurship end of things, we sort of see the link between risk and reward. The opportunity takes a risk to start a company, and they hope that it pans out, and they invest their resources, and they work their hardest to make it happen. At the other end of the scale, the necessity entrepreneur doesn't necessarily have a lot of resources. Our subsistence farmer doesn't really have a lot to work with, but there might be somebody in the United States or in Germany who's been laid off from their job and doesn't have another job opportunity, so they pick up entrepreneurship as a way to kind of fill the gaps. And necessity entrepreneurship often gets overlooked. It often gets forgotten in the way that we think about entrepreneurship. In both instances, these entrepreneurial practices can create problems. We think of the opportunity entrepreneur starting a social media channel, a social media venture, which could perhaps have negative social impacts on society as a whole. And so even though there's something exciting about that entrepreneurial opportunity-oriented venture, there's still a sense that it could create some issues as well. For the necessity entrepreneur, there's all kinds of negative externalities or bad things that can kind of flow to that venture. If I'm a subsistence farmer, I'm kind of living on the edge. I don't have the resources to effectively support my family. I might be doing things like depleting the soil and threatening my future economic opportunities. My project, my farming might lead to desertification or things like this. So there's a sense that both kinds of entrepreneurship have some inherent negative risks. And so part of what we do when we're supporting entrepreneurs is to try to move them into more positive directions. How can that subsistence farmer move beyond subsistence? How can that opportunity entrepreneur take their product or their company or their idea in a way that actually benefits society or benefits community or benefits the investors in that particular venture? I'll say that if you're an opportunity entrepreneur, there are tons of support structures out there around the world to help you out in that sort of an approach. Things like incubators and accelerators, these kinds of structures have been created specifically to try to support you in your pursuit of opportunities. But if you're a necessity entrepreneur, things can be a little lonelier. It's a much more difficult process. And I would say that the research shows us that there's three things you should think about if you've been driven into an entrepreneurship situation because of a lack of other opportunities. So the first thing is that mentoring will help the necessity entrepreneur even more than in other entrepreneurial circumstances. Find somebody who has been through the process or the situation that you're looking at, who has succeeded in the kind of venture or business that you're pursuing, and use them to help avoid challenges or problems that they successfully overcame in the past. Find a way to kind of move beyond the mistakes that they made and learn from their previous experience. The second piece that's useful for necessity entrepreneurs is to think about peer groups. Years ago, in the social finance and micro-lending space, organizations like the Grameen Bank found that necessity entrepreneurs were much more likely to be successful if they organized themselves into groups of 6 to 10 peers, other necessity entrepreneurs who are starting similar ventures at the same time, and you effectively form a support group that allows each of those entrepreneurs to perform better than if they're just trying to go it alone and go it on their own. And the third thing, if you're a necessity entrepreneur, that becomes very important is that research out of the World Bank shows that one of the primary reasons that some entrepreneurs succeed where others fail is they maintain their high levels of motivation. So you need to surround yourself with people who are positive, who are supportive, who give you encouragement, and who raise your energy levels as you seek to implement that necessity entrepreneurship idea. And if you can follow those 3 skills, there's a much better chance that your entrepreneurial venture, even if it's driven by necessity, will create genuine opportunities down the road.